Apple have just got this new M3 chip.
A Sydney-based startup, Leonardo.Ai.
We're really excited by what we're seeing with some of the startups to go global from Australia. This week in AI, it's been a while, Dror.
Hey,
We're back.
it's good to be back.
Three things that matter this week in AI. How are you going?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I've been missing having our chats, but I'm glad we're back in action.
I don't know what's happening in this week in AI because I don't have the weekly show.
Well, we're back. You want to kick off today? What's exciting you?
Yeah, sure. I'll kick off. So as you know, I've mentioned it a few times. I've got an open bet that by the end of the year we're going to see serious global regulation on AI, and I think I'm getting a little bit progress here. The White House came up with an executive order, which is not strictly speaking a law, but it's the beginning of the political machine heading towards a law. They're basically trying to do two things. They're trying to say, well, we acknowledge there are potential catastrophic risks in AI, and they're trying to find reasonable way to begin the regulatory machine to put it in place. Maybe I should say the regulatory structure. What's interesting is that the way they did it was they basically saying, well, any model that's trained above a certain compute, it requires some sort of regulatory oversight. And also big companies, big AI labs must collaborate with law enforcement agencies for safety reasons. Obviously, the knee-jerk reaction of the rest of Silicon Valley was to jump and start screaming, regulatory capture. And, you know, both sides are right here. There's no one is wrong here. The government, society needs to have a regulatory oversight. Regulatory oversight can create regulatory capture for the big players, basically creating monopoly power into a certain area of the market. And it's good to be, you know, a monopoly. I think it's a big positive development. I think that conversation, the pushback between the two forces, is a conversation society needs to have. Yeah. What no one seems to be responding to right now is how exactly this applies beyond the US. So we'll have to see. What do you think?
I think we talked about that a while ago. You were saying, I remember that distinctly before this became a bigger topic. You're talking, it's a little bit like nuclear weapons. You know, we regulate all those dangerous, I guess, weapons.
Technologies.
In some ways, yeah. But if we look at AI in that context, it can be weaponized. It can be used to do things that will cause harm. And there's also a lot of positive that can come from it. So, I mean, my big question is really around this: is can it be regulated? And so, whilst everyone wants to do all, you know, it's great to say all these things, but can it practically be implemented? I think the probably one thing is, if it is legislation that comes in, then at least if there are, I guess, rogue people doing things that aren't positive, they have some way to go after them. And so, look, I think it's interesting, like you say, it's outside of the US. It'll be interesting to see what happens in Australia. And, you know, whether we just, you know, follow what's going on there. And, you know, we got these different zones around the world, and we look at the US as sort of coming somewhere in terms of what they are able to do. Or
no, I don't think so. I think China is way more strict about, because everything needs to be subordinated to the will of the Communist Party. And like the one thing the Communist Party can't accept is someone has power beyond, you know, the party. So in the West, we like to say a lot of bad things about the Chinese, but the truth is the matter is that at least where it comes to regulating industry, the Chinese are way more strict than the West. Like, for example, there was a law a few years ago that game companies like must bake into the games a way to verify the age of a kid and not let him play more than an hour a day. I mean, as a parent, you kind of say, that's not a bad idea. I mean, it's not exactly freedom and like stuff, but it's pretty wise. We know these things are addictive. So anyway, so China is definitely pro-regulation. I think European and America are. So really, we're the bad actors of the world. And whether or not you can regulate it or not, I think if there is a will, there is a way. We managed to regulate food. We're regulating what fruits kids eat all over the world. We're regulating, I don't know, bicycles. You have to adhere to a certain standard of safety, you know, so why can't we regulate like this super technical stuff? I believe it's possible. And I think those who are saying it's art, they're trying to argue that regulation is always bad. That's a very naive approach. It's a very Silicon Valley, you know, pink glasses, everything, you know, freedom, and very naive in my opinion. But the thing that they are bitching about is that they are not inside the regulatory capture team. So as soon as they will be invested in companies that get the regulatory capture, they will be very much pro regulatory, enacting regulation. So there's a bit of
Yeah.
disingenuousness there.
Have you seen where, I know we've talked a lot about Apple, but Apple have just got this new M3 chip. I'm not sure it's exactly what they're saying it is, but I think, what's your sort of take on how this will be used? Because they're saying this will be, a really significant step forward in terms of the evolution of Apple, Apple silicon, and there's a lot more, I guess GPU cores in what they're doing.
So I think the way that Apple is joining the AI party is by pushing articles like this that talk about how they join the party. I don't buy the premise of this article. Look, yes, Apple has a roadmap for their chip and the silicon, and they are adding capabilities. And some of these capabilities are GPU, and we know that GPU type capabilities are important for AI application. But we need to say, wait, hold on, let's just call it for what it is. The current, like the thing we're talking about, which say AI these days, like ChatGPT, LLMs, and so forth, has really had nothing to do with CPU, GPU on your laptop or your phone. They have all to do about training a model and then serving you inferences of that model, which requires a massive cluster in the cloud. So I love Apple product, and it's important that they have next generation capabilities. But to make this kind of bridge and says, oh yeah, look, we have M3 chip coming on, and it's GPU power, and it has some GPU capabilities which are important to AI. Therefore, Apple is joining the AI party. It's just a clickbait at best, or just bullshit, if we're honest.
I don't know. Look, I think they're developing something ahead of time. That's the way they're saying it, and I can hear what you're saying. There is a lot of marketing around some of this, but I do think there will be use cases for this a bit more. I guess time will tell, and it depends on how things will be run. I know we've got this model right now about the way you're saying it, but I think there will be some use cases for this, and I guess we're going to see as that plays out whether that will become a thing.
Let's ask ChatGPT, what are use cases for AI-powered chips on laptops?
I think some of the use cases are around, is around that photographic related, where some of that processing may be done, locally as well. I don't know. Well, I noticed with the M1 around video, particularly rendering video and all of that, but that's not AI related necessarily.
Yeah, it's like, fine, you can do here. It says enhance performance of AI application, improve graphic processing, voice and facial recognition, natural language processing, predictive text and writing assistance, content curation, battery life optimization. Technically speaking, those are AI kind of related capabilities, but that's not the current zeitgeist. When we say AI, we mean like more ChatGPT level, like actual intelligence, as opposed to algorithms that are intensive, that can run in the back and front. So it's hard because we don't have this distinction language. So Gen AI, I guess if you want to distinct it.
Look, I think it's probably around making sure that they stand out over Intel and AMD. That's probably the bigger thing here, to make sure, and then there's this continual race both at that sort of cloud level with Nvidia and various people, and I guess this is going to be at that more PC level, or that machine level. So yeah, we'll see how that plays out. What else, Dror? What else has been happening?
We're hearing about a Sydney-based startup called Leonardo.Ai. You know about them, so why don't you take this one?
Yeah, look, I think Leonardo.Ai, and it's really interesting. So they're being talked about as being the next Canva, and if you look at some of the adoption of what they've had over the last 8 months, it's been pretty significant. I think Blackbird have backed them, and that's always a big help and a big sign. And I know some of the other guys that have invested in that. Yeah, look, they've got over 28,000 subscribers and generated over 400 million images. So look, it's a company that is very similar to many other people around generating images, and so they've obviously got a great start, and they're generating pretty good revenue right now. So I think they're kind of in the millions of dollars, which is great. But I kind of worry about the sort of valuations and how they can keep doing that. It'll be interesting to see the churn rates on this. So people are trying and using it. It'll be interesting to see as that plays out over the next year, if they can keep those active users and keep them going. And so some of the reports there are, after 3 months or whatever, where people are dropping off. So I think it's interesting. It's great to see an Australian company like Leonardo doing so well. I just hope that they can keep that going, and that's one of my big questions, is how they can continue to differentiate. Obviously they've got a great user experience from what I understand, and so yeah, I don't know what you think. It does feel like there's a talk about it being a bit frothy and bubbly, but I think over the long term, if they can keep adapting, maybe they will have they could be that next Canva. I'm not convinced of that just right now, though.
I'm first of all, kudos to any entrepreneur, and definitely local entrepreneurs who are raising money and fighting the fight, and it's definitely encouraging to see. So I'm all cheering for them. I think the two things that they probably are focusing right now is there's definitely room for text to image type business models, but it's also rapidly being commoditized, meaning that they're running fast with their capabilities and trying to capture market and get an audience and actually build and then try the business model, and the numbers are encouraging. Obviously, but at the same time, the massive players are coming after them, right? So, building a text to image capability these days is literally like baked into the core capabilities of the big models like GPT-4, etc. So now what do you do? So what they have to do is to start finding like the niche, the unique feature set that their customers need. So that is the game. And given that they have some revenue and they can raise some money, that's great. So now they can hopefully use that money and revenue to, move faster and, build a set of, in a way, technology mode or product feature modes or something that differentiate them from a crowded space. I'm sure that's what they're focusing on. Yeah, it's good to see a local play. Definitely, Sydney is a hub for graphic, right? For graphic, even Canva is here. It was like definitely some sort of concentration of talent around, image generation, graphic processing, and so forth. And that's also encouraging because you can imagine that someone will snap it and leverage that capability instead of building it from scratch. So I agree that it is a crowded space and it's kind of commoditizing. But like anything, if you're able to, find the users that pay you, raise some money for investors, deploy it in the optimal way, you stand a chance, and I'm cheering for them. I'm very excited about that.
Yeah, and I think they do have some differentiators. I think they're being used a lot with game developers and so forth. So, they need to use it. This isn't just a generic use case of someone generating images. I think it's being used to generate real, there's a higher level of usage in those kind of use cases. And so if they can really continue that, and that could become the standard, then I can see how that, they could be that. But like I say, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. Once again, we're at those very early stages, and people are trying to work out where they sit, and then equally, there's some new. I do consistently believe that there's going to be new business models and new things that come out of all of this technology, and we're still not seeing that yet. We are going to see that, and I think that's what's exciting. And so yeah, we'll continue to see how they're going.
Another interesting bit is that the article talks about high churn rate and the need for the company to combat that. I think that also signals a change of an era in SaaS businesses. SaaS businesses used to be thought of as relatively sticky because kind of once you get in, it's hard to get out. Once you sell, a company, some company buys a few seats or a few licenses for your SaaS product, the hope is that you're getting in and it's slow to get out. Now there's been a lot of evolution in just how easy it is to build a SaaS payment system. Just the simplicity, just you're using Stripe APIs these days, and in a number of hours you can basically instrument your software with SaaS. It can be minutes if you know what you're doing. Now that's good because more people can build businesses but it's also bad in a way because it also makes easy for people to cancel the subscription and moving on, right? So the signals we used to care about as investors is like, okay, ARR is it's like the most important signal in a startup, right? It's like, what's the ARR? But now that signal is now not good, not enough, because it doesn't tell you how. I mean, we always looked at ARR and churn. That's always true. But I'm just saying the relative importance of those two things are now changed a little bit, because churn is easier to happen in new startups, because it's like, oh, I tried for a month, I literally unsubscribe, and I'm done. It's an easier process than the kind of old generation SaaS, if you want.
No, 100%. And I think particularly in this, where we're getting very similar products, if the cost of changing over is minimal, then people will continue to do that. But that's why I was saying if they can niche into a particular area, offer a particular user experience, like I say, the example might be gaming. If they can own that space and make that really relevant to that, then you've got paying customers that may just stick with that and that become the sort of standard. So what else, Draw? We have you sort of seen the new model that what is it? It's Find, is it? Find has a new code model that's more efficient, quicker than GPT-4, and they're sort of saying that it's both quicker, smaller, uses less tokens. I believe we've talked about this before around Llama, and I think that's built on top of that. But just that we're going to have these smaller models that become more efficient. Have you seen much around this? What's your sort of take on where this is going?
I love the idea of bundling, unbundling. So I like the idea of like a dedicated code, AI for code, right? So Copilot in a way, right? And they're giving definitely OpenAI a bit of what they say, run for their money. How do you say that?
Yeah, right, yeah.
So on the other side, I'm just curious if in the realm of intelligence, are you going narrow? Do you want to go broad? So right, if ChatGPT is super smart, then I can ask him a bunch of technical questions and then a random question. I don't need to switch to another product to ask a complete different question if I want to do some marketing, or if I'm in a meeting and someone says something and I want to ask it. So it's just interesting, like we used to think like the more your tool is specific, then the tool is more better for that job, and the more your tool is general, then it's less good for the specific job, but you've got a general applicability for the tool. So think about like a Word as a word processor, and think about like some specific AI marketing Gen AI startup that generates text for your content marketing. This is a very specific tool. Word is a very general tool. And then you go like, well, what if Word or Google Docs would add a feature that did just that? Will that become a better tool now? So it's an interesting open question. What are we going to see in the intelligence space, right? Because we are making our tools more and more intelligent. So that's first observation, right? So there's this trade-off between specificity and general applicability for intelligence. And it just, my hunch is that, well, I want the most intelligent thing I can find. That's one. The other one is though that because they're able to build a thing that's faster and cheaper, so that's really important progress, right? So because if every time I'm asking the model for code completion or help with a bug, if that costs a lot of money to the provider, that's a shitty business model. And then if they are reducing the cost of and increasing the speed of that, that's a technology evolution in of its own right. So that's really interesting development. I don't know how the business is doing, what's the revenue in terms of progress. That's great progress.
We had an event in Melbourne yesterday, and one of the questions that was asked, so we had a room full of VCs talking a little bit around where we are and what's going on. One of the questions was raised was how do startups compete when there's no allocation of chips out there? All the allocations of NVIDIA chips are already taken up because larger companies have bought them out. One of the things we discussed was, and in fact, it was there was a guy by the name of Maurice Whitaker, and Maurice is the chairman of WTI Industries, and they're one of the people that do venture debt. In fact, they're involved with the early days of Facebook and so forth. And he was just discussing in Silicon Valley that actually some of the larger, I think Andreessen Horowitz are actually purchasing some of those chips for their startups and allocating them and doing that as a value add. And I thought that was really interesting to see what they're doing. But one of the points I discussed at that event was because there is a shortage, we're going to have models that are smaller. The compute is less, and so that there's less requirements for these chips. So I think, as well as an example, this is a smaller model. This use case of smaller models is going to allow for us to require less compute. I guess that's what I'm trying to say, is that we need to become more efficient, and the scarcity of some of these things is going to cause people to develop differently, to use different kinds of models, as well as other players are going to come into the market. It's going to take some time, obviously, but I think that's what also will come off the back of this. And it's good to see that there's still competition. I think there's a long way for this to run. And whilst there's a lot of talk always about ChatGPT, I think there's all these other products that are going to be equally significant, if not more, and it's really how we can do that and use them effectively.
Cool.
Anything else, Dror, today?
It's been a busy week, as any week. I think I'm looking forward to the next week. What about you?
Yeah, look, there's so much going on in this space. Some of the other discussions we've been having is Australia. Why Australia? And that was a big topic in our forum yesterday. Was it's exciting what's happening in Australia. That growing from Australia to go global is a really interesting thing. And I think with the tighter economic climate, startups in Australia are more capital efficient. And so we're really excited by what we're seeing with some of the startups to go global from Australia. And so I think the ecosystem here is, has a lot of really great things ahead. And so that's what we're seeing. We're continuing to see that each week, and I'm excited. So look, we'll catch up next week. That's This Week in AI.
This week in AI. See you later.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.